Fresh out of college, with a degree in nursing, I felt on top of the world when I landed a job at St. Augustine's Hospital. It was a well-regarded institution, and I considered myself lucky to have secured a position so quickly. The building itself was imposing, an old Gothic structure that loomed over the city, with a sense of both grandeur and foreboding. Its reputation was sterling, but there were whispers about the top floor, whispers I dismissed as nonsense. My first day was a whirlwind of introductions, paperwork, and orientation. The staff was friendly, and the patients seemed well cared for. I was assigned to the emergency room, a busy and intense environment, but I thrived under pressure. The thought of helping people in their most vulnerable moments was both humbling and exhilarating. As the days turned into weeks, I began to hear more about the mysterious top floor. It was off limits to most staff and patients, reserved for special cases, though no one seemed to know exactly what that meant. The other nurses and doctors would occasionally joke about it, referring to it as the grim floor, but there was always a nervous edge to their laughter. One night I was on a late shift, and the ER was unusually quiet. I found myself alone at the nurse's station, scrolling through patient files when a call came in. It was from the top floor. My heart skipped a beat as I picked up the phone. "Hello, ER nurse station. John speaking," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "John, we need you on the top floor immediately," a calm but authoritative voice said. "A patient requires urgent attention." I hesitated, unsure if this was some kind of prank. "I'm not authorized to go up there," I replied. "This is not a request, John. The elevator will be waiting for you." The line went dead, and I was left staring at the phone. My curiosity was piqued. Despite my apprehension, I found myself walking toward the elevator. As promised, the doors slid open as I approached, and I stepped inside. The ride was unnervingly smooth and silent, the numbers climbing steadily until I reached the top. The doors opened to a long, dimly lit hallway. The air was colder here, and I felt a chill run down my spine. The walls were lined with old photographs and paintings, their subjects staring out with lifeless eyes. I followed the hallway until I reached a set of double doors marked "Restricted Access." Taking a deep breath, I pushed the doors open and entered. The room was vast and eerily quiet, filled with rows of hospital beds. Each bed had a patient, but they were all covered with white sheets, their faces hidden. The only sound was the soft hum of the ventilation system. "John, over here," the same voice from the phone called out. I turned to see a figure standing at the far end of the room, shrouded in shadows. I approached cautiously, and as I got closer, I could make out more details. The figure was tall and slender, wearing a long black coat. His face was gaunt, with hollow cheeks and piercing eyes that seemed to see right through me. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. "I'm Dr. Grimm," he replied with a thin smile. "I oversee this floor." "Dr. Grimm? Seriously?" I couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. It sounded like something out of a bad horror movie. "I assure you, John, my name is quite fitting," he said, his smile fading. "We have a patient who requires immediate care. Follow me." He led me to a bed near the center of the room. The patient was an elderly man, his skin pale and almost translucent. He was hooked up to various monitors, but the readings were all over the place. "What's wrong with him?" I asked, feeling a sense of dread creeping in. "He's at the end of his journey," Dr. Grimm said softly. "Your task is to make him comfortable." I nodded, slipping into professional mode. I checked the man's vitals and adjusted his IV. As I worked, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something profoundly wrong with this place. The patients under the sheets were too still, and the air felt heavy with sorrow. "Do you ever wonder about death, John?" Dr. Grimm asked suddenly, his voice breaking the silence. I glanced at him, unsure how to respond. I suppose everyone does at some point. "Death is not something to fear," he continued, his eyes fixed on the patient. "It is a natural part of life, a transition to something beyond our understanding.
I nodded, though I wasn't sure I agreed. The concept of death had always terrified me, the finality of it, the unknown. I finished my tasks and stepped back, feeling a mix of relief and unease. "Thank you, John," Dr. Grimm said, his tone sincere. "You may return to your duties now."
I left the room, eager to put as much distance between myself and the top floor as possible. The elevator ride down felt interminable, and when the doors finally opened, I practically ran back to the ER. I tried to focus on my work, but the image of Dr. Grimm and the covered patients haunted me. Over the next few weeks, I couldn't stop thinking about the top floor. I asked some of my colleagues about it, but most of them shrugged it off, claiming it was just a place for palliative care. One night, however, an older nurse named Sarah pulled me aside. "You're curious about the top floor, aren't you?" she asked, her eyes filled with a mixture of pity and warning. "Yeah," I admitted. "I can't get it out of my mind. What is really going on up there?" Sarah sighed, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "I've been here for over 20 years, and I've seen things that defy explanation. Dr. Grimm is different. Some say he's been here since the hospital was built, and that he never ages." I frowned. "That sounds impossible." "I know," she said, lowering her voice. "But I've seen old photographs of the staff, dating back decades, and he's in every single one of them, looking exactly the same." A shiver ran down my spine. "What does he do up there?" "He helps people cross over," she said, her voice barely audible. "He's not just a doctor, John. He's something else." I wanted to dismiss her words as nonsense, but the fear in her eyes was real. I thanked her for the information and returned to my duties, my mind racing. The more I thought about it, the more I felt compelled to uncover the truth. One night, I decided to take matters into my own hands. The ER was quiet, and I knew it was now or never. I made my way to the elevator and rode it to the top floor. The hallway was just as cold and eerie as before, but this time, I was prepared. I carried a flashlight and a sense of determination. I pushed through the double doors and entered the vast room. The patients were still there, lying under their sheets, unmoving. I moved quietly, my footsteps echoing in the silence. I needed to find out what was happening here. I approached one of the beds and gently lifted the sheet. The sight that met my eyes made my blood run cold. The patient was not just dead. They were desiccated, their skin stretched tight over their bones, eyes sunken and hollow. It was as if all life had been drained from them. "What are you doing, John?" Dr. Grimm's voice cut through the air, startling me. I turned to see him standing at the end of the room, his expression unreadable. "What is this place?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "What are you doing to these people?" Dr. Grimm sighed, his shoulders sagging slightly. "I am merely a guide, John. These souls are ready to move on, but they need help. I provide that help." "By draining them of life?" I asked, horrified. "By easing their transition," he corrected. "Death is a natural process, but it can be frightening. I help them let go." I shook my head, unable to comprehend what I was hearing. "You're killing them." "No, John," he said softly. "They are already dying. I simply offer them a peaceful passage." I backed away, my mind reeling. "I can't be a part of this." Dr. Grimm nodded, his expression sorrowful. "I understand. Not everyone can accept what I do. You are free to leave." I didn't need to be told twice. I turned and fled, racing down the hallway and into the elevator. The ride down was agonizingly slow, and when I finally reached the ER, I felt like I could breathe again. I handed in my resignation the next day, unable to continue working at a place that harbored such darkness. The hospital administration didn't seem surprised, and I couldn't help but wonder how many others had done the same. As I walked out of St. Augustine's for the last time, I felt a sense of relief mixed with lingering dread. The top floor and its grim overseer would stay with me forever, a reminder of the thin veil between life and death. I had looked behind the curtain, and what I had seen had changed me. Years passed, and I moved on with my life, But the memory of Dr. Grimm and the patients he cared for never faded. Sometimes, late at night, I would think about the old hospital and the eerie top floor. And sometimes, in the quiet of my own home, I could swear I heard the soft hum of the ventilation system. If you want more stories like this, like and subscribe.